Hello and welcome. First of all, I'm Joss, and today I'm going to be presenting to you How to Not Be Cringe, which is the retitled version of the slideshow that used to be called Social Engineering 101. This will be a guide to building inclusive spaces, reducing ick, nurturing creativity, and getting people to stop flexing on each other. We're going to start with an intro, talk about why we're here, give a little bit of a TLDR on Waterloo. We'll then dive into some fun facts and alarming diversity statistics that will hopefully get you all riled up. Talk about your role in this as engineers, community builders, and human beings, and finally give you some tactical strategies that you can use to build inclusive spaces, reduce ick, nurture creativity, and get people to stop flexing on each other. So, why we're here, why you might be watching this video, is because you design or you have an interest in designing and hosting spaces for people who love to create. This might look like hosting co-working sessions at your school, hosting hackathons, fellowships, being a club leader, leading a company, or even just holding dinners. If you're someone like me and you were looking for these people, you may have felt similar to I did when I wanted to do this. I looked around at the startup ecosystem at my school, and it was not what I thought it was going to be. I did start school during the pandemic, so, credit to the pandemic, I guess, for squashing a lot of that energy on campus, but it didn't really matter why it was the way that it was. I just knew that when I looked around, I knew zero people building companies. It felt like everyone was super disconnected. I had no role models who were pursuing anything other than working at big tech companies. And I think all of that was just a little bit disheartening for me because I was really excited about the entrepreneurial ecosystem that I wanted to enter. So this left me with the question for a while of how do we find and support great, diverse, and caring people as they do meaningful work over time? This emphasis on meaningful work over being a founder, I think, is super important to highlight because nobody is an engineer or an artist or a writer in this tiny insulated box. I think we're all the artists, we're all the engineers, and I've never met a software developer that doesn't have a super niche hobby that they're really passionate about. And then also, how do we have a lot of fun while doing it? If it's not fun, other people are not going to want to participate. I'm not even going to want to participate. And so what we started with in March 2022 is these initial graphics. Between whisperings among friends, we realized a lot of people felt this way. A lot of people wanted this environment where they felt free to build, where they felt like they had a community around them cheering them on. But we needed to almost sell the vision. So at Waterloo, it felt like if you were someone who wanted to start your own thing, you were in this sea of people who wanted to work in big tech, who were so excited to announce their internships, who were doing side projects, not because they were passionate about them, but just to add to their resume so they could get these big internships. Which all of that's valid. I've participated in that system, but we had a theory that a lot of people had lost this joy of creating things, and that all it would take was a few voices cutting through the noise, and everyone would realize that there were builders and creatives all over campus, and we could build a lot of momentum and community around, honestly, just doing work that everyone found personally meaningful. And what was super, super cool to see is how quickly people responded to these Figma graphics that we built one night. In 24 hours after posting these on our little UW Startups account, which had just started off, it had 0 followers, we grew to 100 followers, and that was super validating that this isn't a unique problem that people are experiencing in isolation. It's actually something a lot of people want, and if we all just decide to bring it together, we can make it happen. And what did that result in? Since March, we've had over 418 unique attendees at our events and co-working sessions, of which we've thrown 38. We've built a pipeline that involves these super fun social networking events, but not in a cringe way, hopefully. It's a fine line. And then also taking all of this energy around meeting new people, building cool projects, and actually facilitating space for people to do that with our weekly recurring co-working sessions called Socratica. Now we're at a point where we're almost having too much demand for what we're doing. People are really excited about it on campus. And I want to, and we want to, kind of share pieces of this that have allowed us to have a following of 45% women in a school that's largely male-dominated on the engineering side of things. How we have so much hype going on about what logistically is just putting people in a room, giving them some snacks, and telling them to work. And how we end up with quotes like, I would feel like myself more in these 3 hours than in my entire week. The statistics are great. They're fun to track over time. I'm a big nerd for metrics and whatnot, of course, but I think the stuff that really resonates with me more than any of that is the fact that we're logistically doing co-working sessions and events, but fundamentally what we're doing is we're connecting people and we're showing them that they can do things that make them happy, they can build things they're excited about, and they can receive a lot of social validation for doing those things so that ultimately they don't feel so alone. And I think that is really the driving force for a lot of the organizing team as we do what we do. Here's some pictures because I just want you to look at them. So we're going to sit here for a little bit, but not too long. We'll move on. So now we're going to pivot a bit and we're going to talk about some fun facts and alarming statistics. They're not actually that fun, disclaimer, but buckle up. They're really important and they'll tie back in by the end. So something that we always have been doing since we started holding these spaces is asking key questions like, who is not in this room and why? Could theoretically anyone enter this room and feel comfortable? And who will self-select and who feels entitled to this space? Self-select out of this space. And I think once you start analyzing every event that you attend, every event that you host, all of these spaces, you start to realize that specific groups of people are often the ones self-selecting out, who aren't in the room, and who would maybe be uncomfortable in these environments where they don't feel represented. And groups of people, to name them, from what I've observed, are women and Black and Indigenous people of color for the most part. This varies by region, and Waterloo also has a particular hard time with finding people who are doing art-related projects who are in faculties other than engineering and computer science. So always having these questions back of mind have been really key to curating the vibes, I guess, at the events that we're running. To really briefly touch on this, a mentor of mine actually planted this seed in my brain. Medical school and law school used to have equally alarming diversity statistics in relation to specifically the representation of women in the industry. But over the past 12 or 49 years, they've seen dramatic increases. And I think a big part of this is a marketing thing, whether it's word of mouth or Grey's Anatomy. I can't attribute the intense passion for being a surgeon that all my friends in middle school had to anything other than Grey's Anatomy. But it leaves you with the question of, why does engineering specifically struggle with this problem? And something that's interesting to note is when the Waterloo admissions essays were evaluated at a large scale, there was often this finding that women would be really represented in industries where there was a clear connection to making the world a better place. So things like biomedical and environmental engineering actually don't have this problem attracting and recruiting women. But it's more than a marketing problem. It's also a culture problem. And so there's some things that happen that you notice, like walking into a packed room and you're the only woman there. In my experience, this applies to any underrepresented group of people, even if that's just you're an art student in a room full of CS students. And maybe you're the only woman there because you're the only one organizing the event. Or you go to meetups, hangouts, networking events by yourself. In my experience, there's a lot of men being extremely awkward around you, which leads to you getting completely ignored, which is not great. Or people not wanting to be your partner in class, never asking you questions, not assuming you're smart, things like that. And you definitely pick up on those over time. But there's also things you don't notice that in my capacity as an organizer, doing more research on this type of things, I've been alarmed by. So things like getting referrals at companies where they change their language from give a referral to who's a lead that you might have, they actually see an uptick in the number of diverse candidates getting referred because people really, when they're placing their personal stake on this is someone that I am endorsing, they often refer people like themselves, which inherently will lead to a diversity problem. Other things, being screened out of job applications because of your name, whether it's hard for the recruiter to pronounce or if it's just female, there's statistics that show similar resumes will get passed over just based on changing the name. And having a hard time finding mentors, especially relatable mentors, is really challenging. And then finally, this all kind of leads to you don't even understand or realize that you're doing it necessarily, but you might start self-selecting out of things because you know that if you go to a networking event, you're probably going to be alone standing in the corner and not have a great time at the end of the night. So you start to make these internal decisions about opportunities you put yourself up for that you don't even understand you're doing as someone who's underrepresented in the startup or engineering or whatever industry. And this leads to some alarming statistics, like 40% of American women who graduate with engineering degrees either never enter the profession or eventually leave it, with the culture being the most frequently cited reason for leaving. And other things like 70% of American engineers are white, or for women of color, 36% of those leaving the roles left due to unfairness. And I think when you look at statistics like this, you can also read personal testimony or talk to any friend of yours. It really solidifies for me why I hate the term imposter syndrome so much. I feel like imposter syndrome diagnoses the issue as a personal one that intrinsically people like women just inherently have because of, biology, when in reality it's more about this system that consistently tells people you don't belong here. And so of course people are picking up on that and they're starting to raise their hands less. And so I think in order to actually solve some of these problems and move the needle on some of these statistics, we need to identify that imposter syndrome is not an individual disease experienced by one person or one group of people. It's a result of an environment that is designed to not support, not validate you in your decisions, and ultimately ends up forcing someone out and making them feel like they don't belong because they're observing what's around them. And I think what this collectively results in is a huge missed opportunity. We meet with a lot of founders and we'll ask them the question, why you and why this problem? And that's a super important question to ask, and you can really get a sense for how passionate a founder is about whatever they're working on, and their understanding of the issue in particular, which are all really like key signals on, in my opinion, if they're going to go far or not. What you start to realize, if we're always asking the question, why you and why this problem, as a signal that like this is a good founder, if they have a great answer to that question, it leads you to think about how many problems go unsolved because there's an issue with coordinating the people who deeply understand problems that need to be solved and capital for those problems. VC-backed startups were disproportionately men, white, and based in Silicon Valley, and Ivy League educated, which, inevitably will lead to a lot of dev tool companies, B2B SaaS startups. It makes a lot of sense, and there's no hate to solving these problems. These are important problems that need to get solved, but they are the important problems of Silicon Valley engineers, first and foremost. People didn't think Rihanna would have enough demand for her Fenty beauty line, but it made $100 million in her first 40 days. Allocating the right capital to the right talent is one of the biggest, I think, coordination problems that we can figure out. To solve diverse problems, you need diverse founders, and in order to have diverse founders, you need to be supporting them and not pushing them out of the industry. So finally, I think my point in all of this is, I think a lot of the time when I hear people talk about hiring, talk about figuring out how to get more diversity into whatever systems they're organizing, they'll diagnose it as a pipeline issue. And that's correct. It is a pipeline issue. All the way down the pipeline, you can see that there's a lack of women, of people of color in the pipeline. When you look at the candidates who apply to jobs, it's already an unbalanced playing field. But I think that as engineers, this is the only pipeline issue where we look at, oh, there's an issue in the pipeline, and go, oh, well, not my problem to fix it. If you think about an oil pipeline or a CI/CD pipeline, people go, they diagnose the issue, and they actually try to fix it. And I think that if we view this all in the context of social engineering, there are actual, like, tactical, tangible ways that we can do interventions to build sustainable social infrastructure to patch some of these holes in the pipeline and try to enforce that intellectual rigor should be the reason that succeeding in this industry is challenging. I think currently we're in a state where not getting forced out as someone who's underrepresented is inherently additional resiliency screening as a founder. And it would be really cool to see us make progress on fixing this pipeline a bit so that we can really address problems that need to be solved. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our role in all of this. So I think when you think about trying to address these massive problems that society is experiencing, it's really overwhelming if you think that your job is to solve racism or fix gender inequality in computer science. And understanding your relative position in the world is really important for A, recognizing that you actually do have a lot of power to improve the pipeline, but B, not becoming so paralyzed by your own anxiety and feeling of inability to do anything about it that you take no action at all. So if we think about our place in the world, what we can feasibly impact, but you realize you have a lot more influence than you actually think you do. Something that one of my professors in my first year of engineering school asked to our class was, who do you have authority? Do people look like, are you an influential person? And all of us looked around at each other, and we were 18 and we went, no, obviously not. We're 18. Who thinks we know things? But if you actually think about it, a lot of people, when you're in this position of being educated or whatever it is, maybe you have a younger sibling, they do look up to you for advice. So given that we now understand a little bit more about our personal influence, I'm going to now give some tactical, feasible things that we've implemented in our events and co-working sessions that have made the energy really welcoming and feel great, and help people open up a bit and feel like themselves. So the first one, which I think is arguably our most important one, is that everyone is a host. We call this the host mindset, and it's our response to I'm afraid of talking to women being the reason that our events, at the beginning, we'd have a group of men on one side of the room, a very small group of women on the other side. And what the conversation that I had with my friend was, who was helping me organize, is it's not that we don't want to talk to you, it's we don't know how. And it's funny, right? Like, you can laugh about it, I'm afraid of talking to women, but at the end of the day, that's not a response we want to accept and just sit with. So our solution to this was starting at our large events to have a host pledge. And how it goes is the lead organizer of the event would say, put your hand on your heart and repeat after us. And we actually tap on people's shoulders in the audience to lead the rest of the pledge, which is a meta host mindset. But they say, I will not be a menace. This gets people laughing, but for real. I will clean up my own garbage in the occasional additional cup, which means we have to do less cleanup work after, which is awesome. And then finally, if I see someone standing alone in the corner, I will go be their friend. And this is the part that's really important about the host pledge. You loosen people up a little bit at the beginning, but you have this inclusive promise that everyone is responsible for taking and pledging to at the beginning of the event. And yes, it's a little bit culty, I will give you that. But when you make it more about inclusion than diversity, nobody feels specifically called out. You don't feel like you're the diversity in the room. You don't feel like you're being attacked because you're not being inclusive enough. It's everyone's responsibility, and it's within everybody's power to reach out to people, go be their friends. If you see someone in the corner, go talk to them. And it also gives people a lot of permission and boldness to initiate those conversations. Even I'm really awkward and introverted when I go to events, but at my events when I'm hosting, I have this boldness to me where I feel like I can walk up to anybody and initiate a conversation. So trying to give people that feeling is a big part of what we've been trying to do. The other part of this is tapping people on the shoulder to lead co-working sessions, giving them the tools to know how to get a group of people to all pay attention to what you have to say, and then also encouraging people to extend their relationships that they make at our events outside of us facilitating that, so that we can genuinely build this self-sustaining community at Waterloo. One of my favorite things to do is the "can I introduce you to?" It's kind of like in How I Met Your Mother, the "have you met Ted?" if you understand that reference. When someone walks into an event, the first 10-20 minutes are the most awkward time. So I'll go up, I'll introduce myself, get the ball rolling. And then after we've kind of had a decent conversation, I'll say, "Can I introduce you to?" And I'll walk them across the room and introduce them to someone who I maybe just met. We always have name tags, which is mostly for me, honestly. They'll never say no. If someone said no to me in that, I don't know what I would do. I don't have an edge case written out for that. But I start the conversation. I say, "Hey, meet this person. She's doing whatever." Kind of get that conversation going. And then once it seems like it can fly by itself, I'll excuse myself and say, "Hey, I'm going to go reach out to that person over there. You two have fun though." And then they continue that conversation. And as a host, this is maybe not allowing me to have the most deep conversations at the beginning of the event, but you find all these people on the edges and you can really just pair them up with each other and nurture this beginning energy so that it feels really welcoming for anybody walking in the door, which I think is the first moment people feel really intimidated to be in a space. The next rule is no school or co-op allowed. Co-op is the word that Waterloo uses for their internships. And this largely comes down to, this is a big sentence, but I'm uninterested in building spaces that permission and empower people to do things they're already doing anyways. So if you want to get breakfast with your existing friend group on a Sunday morning, we probably don't need to be facilitating that for you. When people ask if they can work on school at Socratica sessions, which is our co-working, everyone at Waterloo is always working on school at all times. So we don't necessarily need to hold a specific space for that. We have volunteers, we have money that we're putting towards this, and if we don't fiercely protect the things that make it so special, everyone will end up working on school, including me, because I'll see someone else doing it. I'm like, you know what, I actually have an assignment too. And so keeping that momentum from snowballing in the wrong direction is really important. We really just want to be holding spaces where people can meet new friends from other faculties and backgrounds, which is difficult and scary. I myself haven't even figured out how to do this other than the context of the events we're holding. Having spaces to demo cool stuff and get feedback. Possibly having the first intellectual community where people include you in conversations, getting inspired by people who are working in completely different fields and making actual progress on high effort passion projects. I'm convinced that everybody else also wants these things. And this is therefore what I want to dedicate my time to organizing. And I think a lot of people that have stepped up as volunteers, that's why they get so excited about being a part of this. Moving on, accommodations are not a burden. This one's super important. So this one has a little bit of a diagram element to it, but I think that when you're organizing these spaces, you spend a lot of time thinking about the logistics, thinking about the details. You're trying to host great events and co-working sessions, and so you're thinking about ordering muffins and things that are so specific. But then someone comes along and they need a gluten-free or they need a vegan or halal food option. And when you think you have an event of 100 people and it's only one person that's requesting it, you might not think it's the biggest deal ever and it's a bit of a hassle to provide those things. But if you trace it back to the point of what we're actually trying to do, which is make spaces for ourselves and others that feel awesome, which actually improve Waterloo's culture. Go back further than that and you make the tech industry a place where people feel welcomed and invited and permission to show up as themselves. And then go further back to keeping great, diverse, caring people doing high impact work and saving lives and saving the planet, which is giving us a lot of credit. But that means that when you're making decisions about do I need the halal option? Do I need the vegan option? If it's only one person out of 120, the answer is actually yes. Statistically, you don't think it's that big of a drop in the bucket, but for enforcing these environments where people feel really welcome and included, making sure that they don't feel like they're a burden, or making sure that they don't offer, oh, I'll just go without food, it's fine. We want to make sure these experiences feel really inclusive to everybody, regardless of what their accommodation is. And this means also asking upon registration if people need any accommodations. The next thing, always free and walking or public transit. I kind of mush these together because the slideshow is getting really long. Yeah, so walking, LRT, or bus, it should always be accessible to people because a lot of people don't have cars. We don't want the reason people that can't attend our events to be because they couldn't make it there transportation-wise. The other thing is not making things too convenient. So we have an engineering building called E7, and when we used to host stuff there, a lot of people would drop in, just grab free food and leave. And so that effort barrier is something that's really important to ensuring that the people there really want to be there, and that keeps the culture good in our experience. The other thing is always free. So we don't want payment to be an enabler of participation. We had a specific scenario where people were offering to pay their way into events, sessions, and dinners, assuming that our limitations were strictly financial. And of course, as an organizer, it's hard to say no to people. And at first, it seems like the perfect solution. You don't have enough budget, oh, they'll pay for themselves, it's fine. But something we realized is that if an event is at capacity, we have to say no to people who offer to pay their way in. Because if you think about it, if you think back to that concept of who feels most entitled to this space, if we allow this almost backdoor system where people can pay extra money, we have a lottery system for the general pool, and then anybody that has enough money can afford it, feels entitled to the space, can show up, it'll really mess with the intentional efforts that we have to make these spaces feel balanced. And it almost reinforces the existing power imbalances in this profession and elsewhere, where if you have money, if you already feel like you belong here, you're going to get a lot more networking opportunities, you're going to meet a lot more cool people. So we have to be firm on this one, although it is hard to say no to people. And then this one, the balance being the secret sauce, is, I think, really, really fundamental to everything we do. So what does that look like? A big question is always, I don't know where to find people. If you're in an environment where you don't have friends in an arts faculty, how do you get the first one to show up? And something that we've been moderately successful with, it's always a work in progress, but inserting ourselves into diverse communities by attending their events. So these collections of people, whether it's the Women in CS Club, the Cinematography Club, the African Student Association, they already are tightly networked with each other, and they're organizing things. And there's no quicker way to an organizer's heart than attending their events and supporting them. So recognizing that these are communities that already exist, you just might not be tapped into them, is important. Something that we've been really successful with as well is on social media. If you find these Instagram accounts that are values aligned with you, you can actually follow request their followers that are particularly engaged. If they follow back, you can send them a message that essentially says, hey, reaching out because you seem like you might be really interested in this event that we're throwing next week. And then that actually has, sometimes, especially people who are underrepresented, they just need someone to tap them on the shoulder once to feel like they're even qualified to attend. So we've had a lot of success with that. Other than that, connecting with the execs at various orgs, once you get into enough leadership-oriented positions, you realize it's all these connected people running every club on campus. And then the other thing is always encouraging people to bring a friend. That makes it both less intimidating for them and also means that they're less likely to back out and more people get exposure to things. So we actually ask people to, in our registration forms, we now have a question that's who's a friend we should know about? And it's really casual, but it actually really helps us. This is also really important. So writing marketing copy. We have noticed the significant impact that including inclusive language, being interested is enough. The events we run are for you. Let them reject you. Don't reject yourself. People often will swipe up on these stories and actually comment on how effective these things have been at making them go back and consider applying for a thing. They self-elect out of something because they don't think they're qualified, and then they see something like this and they go, I feel really called out right now. And they go back and they do it. Another thing that's really important is words like Web3, founder, cutting edge, crypto, top 1%, networking. These are scary. And it causes great people to self-eliminate from things that you're hosting. So so you're not saying founder. How do you get founder type people without saying founder? You focus more on the problems, in particular, the ones that seem to make the world a better place. So things like, do you think mixed use development is the future of city design? Do you believe that aquaculture, it doesn't matter what you pick. It can be really specific or really broad, but focusing more around the knowledge that women want to be engineers because they want to make the world a better place. And people are way more inclined to say, I'm really interested in this space, I'm experimenting here, than they are to say, I am a founder, I have a company. And so that's been a way that we've really been able to make our events more accessible. The final thing I want to highlight here is from a recruiter friend, and it's something that they used to write in their job descriptions. And it's this statistic that is made up that says only 1% of candidates will ever meet every single requirement on most job postings. If you think about that statement, it does not make any sense. What is that even saying? Nothing. And it's because it's made up. But what she would do in her interview, she'd ask people what made them want to apply for the job. And they would always mention this made up statistic as the reason that put them over the edge to apply. So recognize that the copy you write can actually have a really big impact on your attendees. And also that who you market to is who your organization inevitably becomes. So being really intentional with the wording, making it friendly, making it welcoming, actually translates directly into the people that not only attend your events, but end up leading the organizations or whatever it is that you're trying to build. Another strategy is that who you give a voice to matters. So if you look at the group on the left of all of these circles, imagine this is a co-working session on a Sunday, and everyone in the group is doing a coding project except 3 people. One of them is writing an essay, one of them's editing a video, and one of them's, reading something interesting about philosophy. If you let things naturally fall in terms of who wants to demo at the end of the session, I guess, if you let people volunteer, those who are most entitled to the space, most confident in their work, and most aligned with what people expect them to be doing, will inevitably raise their hands. Even if you took a random selection, you would end up with a lot of coding projects that were really far along. And at the end of the day, the point of demoing is to get feedback, but it's also to inspire other people to do great work that feels true to themselves. And if you allow the demos, if you pick specifically the ones who are underrepresented, the ones who are not part of the majority, and you give them a disproportionate amount of microphone time, you end up with a population of people who starts to diversify in what they're pursuing individually, because there stops being this one standard to aspire to. We saw this over the course of time with our Socratica sessions. People who would initially show up would feel like they had to do like a coding side project, and by the end, people were exploring all sorts of different things. And I think that's what leads to the feeling of feeling more like yourself than any other time during the week. Sorry about this slide. I have no excuses, honestly. This is mostly in here for reference later, but key things to note are understanding that underrepresented people feel less qualified every step of the way. So not just, hitting them with the first prompt to attend an event, but following up can be really helpful. We ask for pronouns upon registration, both to be inclusive and because it allows us to keep track of the number of female attendees, and then balance if necessary by, asking a few extra people to show up. We can highlight people outside of the norm, similar to what I was just talking about. Also, never hosting spaces where specific groups of people are specifically excluded. So some of these spaces are really important to have, like a protected women in computer science community, for example. But our general philosophy has been that great people know great people, regardless of their identities, regardless of where they came from. And so we want to hold spaces where we're saying include everybody instead of excluding people, regardless of who they are. And then, without intention, the vibes will converge to the dominant culture. I think from a personal standpoint, also recognizing about all of the times that you've been validated, when you found role models and peers similar to you, when someone's referred you, believed in you, assumed you were smart, or showed you that you could do things, you actually, as an organizer of these spaces, have the power to do that for other people. And I think appreciating that is the first step of really starting to lean into doing this work. Here are a lot of other strategies, and you can pause and read some of them if you like, but I'm going to carry on. Okay, so sorry for moving my circle around so much. This is kind of my first rodeo with Loom. So now the last one is be silly. So meet people where they are. For us right now, it's largely Instagram. Maybe one day it'll be TikTok, or we'll have like a UW Startups Be Real, I don't know, something else. But currently we kind of found that Instagram is where most people are. It's where they're spending, hours swiping away, wasting time watching slime reels, not to call out myself specifically. But we want to catch them where they are. We've also recognized that Instagram Reels are a lot more effective than a Canva poster because you see real people having fun and you believe it. I don't think I've ever personally really been motivated by a Canva poster in my life. It communicates information, but it doesn't make you have FOMO in the same way. Also using fun songs, and then finally not having a brand voice. I think when I first started trying to post from the UW Startups account, I wanted to have this coherent, cohesive voice, and then I realized that every student-run organization sounds exactly the same in their marketing, and I just decided to have fun with it. So if I mess up on the Instagram story, I'll post, sorry, messed up, thanks for letting me know, carrying on, have a great day. And I think that people really appreciate a little bit more of a human feel that isn't taking themselves too seriously. At the end of the day, we're trying to attract people who aren't interested in entrepreneurship, but just really want to build things and have a good time. And so being more true to yourself, I think, really attracts people that you're going to have a fun time with. Finally, some key takeaways. So firstly, you have more power than you think you do, and this isn't a bad thing. This can be leveraged through giving referrals to things. So if you have fellowship or something that you can refer a few candidates to, think about who immediately comes to mind and then evaluate, are these people that everyone is going to be referring? And then maybe thinking, who's someone that's awesome that might not be the first person that everyone else is going to refer, and put their name forward. You can think about it in your team recruitment. So not hiring people on the basis of being diverse, but at least ensuring that your candidate pool has some diversity in it. You can do things in marketing, and you can do things in events, which I got a little bit more into during the slideshow. And so you have the tools to use it intentionally. Then an improved pipeline, as we socially engineer it, we build the social infrastructure, is going to lead to an increase in important and profitable problems getting solved, which is really, really important. We want to turn that L for society into a dub for society. I can't believe I just said that in the loom, but we're going to keep rolling. And finally, let's build a workforce that we're proud to be a part of. We can all be a part of this. And Waterloo is by no means perfect. It's a constant work in progress. We're out here learning every day. I don't leave every event feeling like it's been the best thing I've ever done. But the progress over time is what's really exciting to see. And I think that even if you host an event and you try all of these things and you might not have had the increase in diversity or that you were hoping for, that you tried super hard for, not being too hard on yourself and realizing that this is a slow shift in culture that we're all collectively working towards. And if you stick to it, it will work. We've seen it work. And it's still making progress to this day. So at the end of the day, focusing on this inclusion piece means that we all win. If you're at the table, make a bigger table, and a rising tide lifts all ships. Thank you.